Hospital workers. What was the dumbest thing a patient did right after leaving? Story 1. I work for a medical device company that makes bone screws. We had a patient sue us for faulty implants apparently. His screws broke less than a month after surgery. This is a big deal and not just from a financial standpoint. So of course we launched a full investigation. Turns out the genius decided to play tackle football less than 1 month after his major back surgery. Our bone screws are strong, but not tackle football strong. His case was thrown out. Opinion: the football player stereotype checks out. Story 2. I work in medical imaging where patients have to drink oral contrast for their exam. Some folks really hate this stuff, and one patient, after being given the oral contrast, went outside and dumped it in the bushes and came back in and said that they had drunk it. Our front desk lady actually saw her dump it in the bushes and told us about it, but we would have seen the lack of contrast in the image even if she hadn't told us. I talked to the patient and was like, "We can see inside of you. We can tell if you drink it or not." Opinion: I don't understand the rationale behind this. Do people just think they're being given something because the doctor thinks it's just a fun thing to do? Story 3. Discharged a patient after a hysterectomy, removing the uterus and stitches at the top of her reproductive organ, and she went home and had intimacy with her partner, busting her stitches and allowing her bowel to protrude through her reproductive organ. Had to have an emergency procedure to fix it. Opinion: I suddenly wish I couldn't read. Story 4. When I was a nursing student, I did a rotation on a transitional care unit in my first year of school, where people go to wait for a nursing home placement. Had an older man as a client who did not have any cognitive impairment complain about abrasions on his reproductive organ. Okay, all is well, and I call for a doctor to look at it, to get some antibiotic ointment for it. The doctor can't come up to our floor for another few hours. I tell the patient this and leave to go do something else. About an hour later, it's time to go take his blood sugar, and guess what I find the man doing? Playing with himself in plain sight, and his hand and reproductive organ are bloody and raw. I literally had to have a conversation with a man my grandfather's age and have to tell him not to do that while the abrasions were healing, and to take it easier once it was healed. Opinion: that's disgusting. I'll never understand how people in the medical field handle these things. Story 5. I feel like I am that person. When I was 15, I broke my arm, went to the hospital, got a cast, went about for a few weeks and got it removed. Great, I have my arm back. Now, I wasn't the brightest kid and needed everything explained to me. No one told me not to have an arm wrestle with my fresh out of cast arm. No one explained it was still healing. 4 hours after having my cast removed, I was back in the hospital and getting a new x-ray and then a new cast put on by the same nurse who just took it off. I have never seen such disappointment in the eyes of someone who wasn't my mother. Opinion: your last sentence is priceless. Story 6. The Darwin Awards is a tale of a man in hospital with a skin problem. The staff coated him all over with a cream that was highly flammable, warned him about it, and told him to keep away from any sources of ignition. He immediately snuck outside for a smoke. Went up like a Roman candle. Opinion: people with oxygen tanks who continue smoking should get nominated for the Darwin Awards as well. It's like they're trying to beat the lung damage by setting themselves on fire. Story 7. I saw someone pull his newly slung arm out of its sling so he could put his jacket on as he was leaving the ER. He just stopped in front of my desk and started whimpering and yelling, "Ow! Oh!" as he slowly worked his arm around to get it out of the sling and into the sleeve of his jacket. I'm pretty sure it wasn't very cold outside at the time. I pleaded for him to stop, but he ignored me. It was really bizarre. Opinion: Was it a cool jacket? Story 8. I am in IT and was working an overnight shift in the emergency room supporting a new software rollout. A dude was brought in because he had drunkenly stumbled out in front of a car and got hit. When my shift ended around 11 a.m., I went to a little Irish pub down the street to have a beer and some lunch before I headed home to get some sleep, and lo and behold, guys, who are in there drinking again? Yep, the same dude from the ER was already drinking whiskey again, just hours after being released from the hospital with a broken arm and a few other injuries. Opinion, this is just sad. Story 9. We used to have this young guy come in frequently for diabetic ketoacidosis. For those not in the know, this typically occurs with type 1 diabetes when their blood sugar, for whatever reason, goes out of control, triggering a chain reaction in the body that, if left untreated, is fatal. Every time this guy came in, he was extremely sick and practically knocking on heaven's door, and he would do this every couple of months. One night I headed into work but stopped at the Tim Hortons lobby to grab a coffee. Ahead of me in line, I see the same guy. Our eyes meet, so I say, "Hey, they let you out today?" As I knew he had been admitted to my unit over the last few days. "Yeah," he says excitedly. Then he goes up to the counter and orders a sugary donut. He literally chows down on it as he leaves and waves goodbye at me. In my head, I am sighing and thinking, see you soon. We haven't seen him in a long time though, so I assume he's been doing better with his blood sugar control nowadays. Opinion. Either he's doing better or a lot worse. Story 10. I have a friend who is a neurologist. He told me he had a patient who came in with something whatever, possibly a small stroke, and after he was treated and luckily spared any apparent ill outcome, my friend told him that he understands that the patient is a smoker, but under no circumstances was he to smoke in the next few days. After the danger time has passed, they could work on him quitting. But that's for the future. But for now, under no circumstances should he smoke. The next day or two, my friend asked about the patient. It turns out the guy left the hospital, crossed the road to the closest five and dime, and bought a pack of cigarettes. He lit up and shortly after had a massive stroke. My buddy was so angry. I asked him, "So then what happened? Did you guys manage the stroke?" And he's like, "I wasn't there when it happened." I had told him, "Stop smoking for 2 effing days," and he snuck off and effed himself. He is paralyzed from the stroke and it's his own effing fault. We gave him a second chance and he effed himself for a smoke. F him. Man, I've never seen him so angry and bitter. Opinion. Darwin goes crazy. Story 11. My brother works as a volunteer for the Red Cross. He mostly volunteers as a medic in ambulances. He told me how they picked up a guy because he crashed his bike after he didn't pay attention and got his tires stuck in some train tracks. About 3 hours later, he was picked up again after he tried to ride his bike with one hand in a cast. The first time round, he sprained his elbow. The second time round, he broke his shoulder on the same side. Opinion. Well, he didn't disable himself on both sides. There's that as a silver lining. Story 12. I was not a hospital worker, but when I was 5, I was visiting my grandpa in the hospital. And when I left, I was walking backward, talking to my mom. I turned around and smacked my head against a parking sign. Had to immediately go back into the hospital to ask for some ice. I imagine the nurses watching got a laugh out of that one. My mom sure did. Opinion. I guess you didn't see that sign coming. Literally. Story 13. When my sister was about 3, she refused to leave somewhere. I can't remember, and my parents were holding her. My sister went limp and popped her elbow out of place, so they took her to the hospital and they fixed it. I kid you not. I'm not lying. The second they opened the door and stepped outside, she was already throwing a fit, and went limp again the second they walked out and popped her wrist. So they had to walk back inside and get it checked. And while the nurse was trying to get her to sit still, he accidentally popped it back. Opinion. Ah, yes, the old nursemaid elbow, they call it. Happened to my cousin a couple of times. Story 14. Not a hospital worker, but I was in the emergency room due to a sports-related injury. Finally got let out after hours of x-rays and examinations as I was learning how to use crutches and watched someone with stitches on his arm start stretching like he was going to run all the way home. He turned around, walked towards the desk and yelled, "Your nurses suck." After the cut on his arm reopened mid-stretch, the woman at the desk looked so tired. Opinion. I really feel for people who have to deal with individuals like this. Story 15. Didn't actually see this, but the story was confirmed by the patient's wife. Guy was diagnosed with appendicitis at a small rural hospital, which needed to transfer him to get the surgery. He refused an ambulance transfer and decided he would just drive himself to the bigger hospital. He was told not to eat anything, so of course he gets McDonald's en route. Then lies about when he last ate. As the anesthesiologist was intubating him for surgery, he vomited into his airway, aspirated it, and ended up with aspiration pneumonia. He never came off the vent and was unalive about a week later from his pneumonia. Hope his last meal was the best Big Mac ever. Idiot. Opinion. What a moron. Story 16. This doesn't fit super well, but I once had a patient who insisted on leaving the hospital. Discharge against medical advice because it's hard to get a good night's sleep. Now, I will admit that the hospital is not the quietest place at night. You have doctors going around checking on sick patients, machines beeping, etc. But they're there for a reason. We could not convince him to stay, so we turned to his wife. His wife said she agreed with us, but she couldn't change his mind. The next day he was no more. It was a very treatable condition. Serious, but he had a good chance of recovery if he stayed. Opinion. Imagine the guilt his wife will feel for the rest of her life for not trying hard enough to convince him to stay. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the bell button to receive notifications to my latest videos.